The wind on Fifth Avenue cut sharper than usual that afternoon, funneling between the glass towers and brushing against Harper Sullivan's swollen belly as she tried to balance 2 grocery bags in her breath. At 7 months pregnant, even walking felt like wading through wet cement. But nothing prepared her for the moment she lifted her eyes and froze in the middle of the crosswalk. There he was, Colton Reeves, her ex-husband, the man who once looked her dead in the eyes and told her she wasn't built to be a mother. He stood only a few feet away, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, holding the hand of a girl whose entire outfit probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent. They looked like the centerpiece of a glossy Manhattan ad, polished, expensive, untouchable. Harper, breath-catching, instinctively wrapped her arm protectively around her belly. Colton's gaze slid over her, slow and intentional. His lips twisted into the smirk she once mistook for confidence. "Well," he said, voice dripping contempt, "I see you're still desperate for attention, Harper. Or is this," he nodded at her stomach, "your latest attempt to trap someone else?" A passerby gasped. Harper's grocery bag slipped, apples rolling into the street. Her throat tightened so painfully she could hardly swallow. Trap someone? He didn't know, didn't care that this baby was the miracle doctors once said she'd never have. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Deep, steady, unmistakably protective. "That's enough." Harper turned and saw a tall man in a navy coat step toward them, eyes fixed on Colton with controlled fury. She recognized him instantly. Dr. Mason Hart, the quiet billionaire who helmed an entire medical tech empire, the last person she expected to witness her humiliation. For a moment, everything seemed to stop: traffic, conversations, even Harper's breath. Mason looked at her with concern that felt strangely grounding. Colton looked shaken for the first time. And Harper? She realized her life had just shifted in a direction none of them could predict. Something was about to change dramatically. Harper's legs were still trembling long after Colton and his new girlfriend disappeared into the shine of Fifth Avenue. She managed to steady herself only when Mason's hand gently touched her elbow, guiding her out of the crosswalk before a taxi could blare its horn again. His touch wasn't invasive, just grounding, the way a railing feels when you're seconds from falling. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, but the lie trembled. "I'm fine, just surprised." The truth hit her in waves the moment she turned away. She hadn't seen Colton in 8 months. 8 months since he slammed the divorce papers onto the table and told her she had failed him as a wife. 8 months since he walked out without looking back. Now she was here pregnant, alone, and juggling groceries like her life depended on it. Her apartment in Brooklyn was small, barely 500 square feet, but it was hers. The walk upstairs felt steeper with her growing belly, and the heater rattled like it had one foot in the grave, but Harper cherished the quiet. It was the first place she'd lived since the divorce, where she could breathe without feeling watched or judged. Bills, though, didn't care about breathing. Rent, medical appointments, baby supplies she could barely afford. And the biggest blow, the debt Colton had tricked her into signing before leaving. Every month, the bank reminders flashed on her phone like little bombs. She set her groceries down on her wobbly kitchen counter, trying to ignore the flickering overhead light. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender detergent, her attempt to create calm, but at that moment, it only reminded her how much she was holding together with thinning thread. Harper slid onto the old sofa, exhaling slowly as the baby kicked. "Hey, little one," she whispered, resting her hand on her belly. She still believed deep down that this baby was her second chance, not her punishment. But surviving alone wasn't easy. Pregnancy had taken her energy, stolen her sleep, and carved fear deep into her chest. There were nights she cried quietly into her pillow, terrified she wouldn't be enough for the baby, for the bills, for herself. Yet she kept going. Because leaving Colton had taken courage she didn't know she had. Because every doctor who once told her she couldn't conceive had been proven wrong. Because even in brokenness, she had held on. Still, after the Fifth Avenue encounter, a truth she hated admitting echoed in her mind. She wasn't as free from her past as she thought. And worse, something about the way Colton looked at her today felt like the beginning of trouble she couldn't yet name. Harper had spent months trying to untangle herself from the memories of her marriage, but some wounds cling like smoke, quiet, invisible, and suffocating. After the Fifth Avenue encounter, those memories returned sharper than ever. Colton Reeves hadn't always been a storm. In the beginning, he was charm-polished into human form, confident, ambitious, and promising her a life she never dared to dream of. Harper was 25 then, fresh out of design school, and painfully eager to love someone who finally seemed to see her. He saw her, yes, but only the parts he could shape. The first year felt like a dream. Weekend trips, rooftop dinners, whispered plans for the future. But the shift came slowly, disguised as concern, advice, improvement. Colton began suggesting what she should wear, how she should speak, which friends were dragging her down. Harper didn't notice the walls closing in until she couldn't breathe without his approval. Then came the worst cruelty, the one that carved scars no one else could see. The infertility diagnosis. Harper remembered sitting in the clinic, hands cold, while the doctor explained test results she could barely process. She remembered turning to Colton, searching for comfort, only to meet an expression she later recognized as contempt. "You failed the one thing a woman is supposed to do," he told her that night. No raised voice, no anger, just pure disappointment. She cried quietly in the bathroom, pressing her palms to her stomach as if she could will life into existence. She tried treatments, changed diets, prayed anything to fix what he called the problem. In truth, she wasn't trying to save the marriage. She was trying to save herself from the belief that she was broken. The emotional distance turned to coldness. The coldness turned to blame. And eventually, blame turned into something uglier. He pushed her to sign financial documents she didn't understand. He traveled constantly without explanation. He stopped touching her, stopped looking at her, stopped pretending. The night he filed for divorce, he didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply set the papers on the table and said, "I need a wife who can give me a future." As if she had stolen his future, rather than losing her own. Harper remembered packing her things, shaking, feeling like a ghost leaving her own life. She remembered the silence of her new apartment. She remembered the unbearable thought that maybe, just maybe, he was right about her. But then months later, her pregnancy test turned positive. A miracle. A contradiction. A second chance she never expected. And the moment she saw Colton today, she understood something chilling. He didn't know the truth. Harper remembered the morning everything changed. It was early, barely 6 a.m., the kind of quiet that only exists before New York City wakes up. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at a pregnancy test she had taken mostly to silence the strange suspicion tugging at her. The doctor had said conception was less than 1% likely. Her body had failed her for years. Her marriage had collapsed under that failure. So when the 2 pink lines appeared, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stared. Disbelief washed through her slowly, like warm water filling a cold room. Then the shaking started, hands trembling, breath stuttering, her heart doing something between a sprint and a prayer. "No, no, this can't be real," she whispered. But even as she said it, something inside her cracked open. Hope. It was the first time she'd felt it in years. She rushed to the clinic, hands cold around her insurance card. The nurse took one look at her pale face and ushered her to an exam room. Minutes later, the doctor appeared, flipping through her chart with a furrowed brow. "Well," he said finally, eyes softening, "Miss Sullivan, you're pregnant. And not just that, the embryo is stable, strong heartbeat. This is what we call a resilient pregnancy." Harper blinked at him. "But I was told." "I know what you were told," he said gently. "But sometimes the body surprises us. Sometimes miracles happen right when you stop expecting them." Miracles. She repeated the word silently, afraid to say it aloud and break whatever fragile magic was holding everything together. But with that miracle came fear. How would she raise a child alone? Would she be enough? Could she carry this pregnancy safely? What if Colton found out and tried to take everything from her again? On the subway ride home, surrounded by strangers and the metallic rumble of the train, something in her shifted. She pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered, "I don't know how I'll do this, but I will." It was the first time she chose herself and her child over the shadow of who she used to be. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter. One written without Colton's voice in her ear. One built from courage she didn't know she had. But miracles rarely come without consequences. And as the weeks passed, Harper began sensing something unsettling. Colton wasn't entirely out of her life. Not yet. Harper had barely adjusted to the idea of becoming a mother when another blow struck, one she never saw coming, but one she should have expected from the man she once married. It arrived in the form of a stark white envelope taped to her apartment door, stamped with the unmistakable logo of Empire National Bank. Her stomach tightened. Nothing good ever came in envelopes like that. Inside was a notice of delinquency. Not a small one. Not a late fee reminder, but a final warning for a loan she didn't even remember taking. Except, she did. Barely. Colton had pushed the paperwork at her 2 years before the divorce, calling it a temporary consolidation loan to clean up their finances. He made her sign it at the dining table, brushing off her hesitation with a kiss to the forehead and the reassurance that smart wives don't question everything. She hadn't read it. She trusted him. And now, she owed $42,000. Her knees weakened. She grabbed the counter to steady herself as nausea, stronger than morning sickness, flooded her. The bank demanded immediate payment or they would begin asset recovery. She didn't have assets. Unless they counted the couch bought secondhand, the rickety bed frame, or her unborn child's future crib that she hadn't even been able to afford yet. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered, but the paperwork told a colder truth. Colton had set her up. He had known what he was doing, and he had walked away clean. That evening, Harper sat in the dim light of her small kitchen, the bank letter spread before her like a verdict. She ran her hand over her belly, feeling a soft kick beneath her palm. "I'm trying," she murmured. "I'm really trying." It struck her then how often women are left cleaning the messes of men who never look back. It wasn't self-pity. It was clarity. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her dwindling contacts for anyone who might help. Friends had scattered after the divorce, unsure how to navigate the broken pieces of her life. Family wasn't an option. For a moment, she wondered if she could reach out to Colton. But the thought of his smirk, his voice, his contempt, no. She'd rather lose everything. Still, the fear lingered like a shadow in the corners of her apartment. What if the bank took her home? What if she had nowhere to go when the baby came? What if this financial trap was only the beginning of Colton's cruelty resurfacing? Harper didn't know it yet, but trouble was closer than she imagined. And it was already on its way. The morning after the bank notice, Harper left her apartment with a tightness in her chest she couldn't shake. New York City buzzed around her, honking cabs, the rumble of buses, chatter from street vendors, but everything sounded muffled, like she was walking underwater. Her grocery tote felt heavier than usual, her breath slightly shorter. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the baby pressing upward. Maybe it was both. By the time she descended the steps into the subway station, her vision had started to blur around the edges. She kept whispering to herself, "Just get to work. Just one train ride. You can cry later." But halfway down the platform, the floor seemed to tilt. The announcement over the speakers stretched into a distant echo. Harper blinked hard, reaching for the tiled wall, but her fingers missed. A wave of dizziness hit so suddenly it stole the ground from beneath her. Her knees buckled. Her tote slipped. And then everything dissolved into chaos. Shouts, footsteps, the screech of a train pulling in as someone yelled, "Ma'am, hey, she's falling." For a split second, before darkness swallowed her, she felt terror, not for herself, but for the tiny heartbeat inside her. Then a pair of strong arms caught her. When Harper blinked awake, she wasn't on the cold subway floor. She was lying on a plush sofa in a quiet, softly lit room scented faintly of white tea. The ceiling above her was high, pale cream, elegant, not a hospital, not her home. A familiar voice came from beside her. "You're awake?" She turned her head and there he was, Doctor Mason Hart, kneeling next to her, his tie loosened, concern etched into every line of his face. His hand hovered near hers, as if he wanted to hold it but didn't want to overwhelm her. "You fainted on the platform," he said gently. "You're dehydrated and extremely stressed. Your body is doing more work than you realize." Her throat tightened. I didn't want to cause trouble." "This isn't trouble," Mason said. "This is a human being who needs help." Only then did she notice where she was, one of the private hospitality suites inside the Plaza Hotel. Mason must have carried her himself or directed others to. "Why here?" she whispered. "Because you needed calm," he answered simply, "and because," he hesitated, "I didn't want you waking up alone." A breath caught in her chest. kindness so gentle felt foreign, almost frightening. For the first time in months, Harper felt safe. And that scared her more than the fall. Harper woke in the soft hush of the suite, feeling steadier but deeply aware of the awkwardness blooming in her chest. Mason had stepped out to take a call, leaving her with a glass of water and a gentle reminder to breathe first, worry later. It was the first time in months anyone had spoken to her like she mattered. But peace never lasted long in her life. A sharp notification buzzed on her cracked phone screen. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was another bill, another warning. But when the second and third alert chimed back to back, a prickling dread crept up her spine. Her name was trending. On social media. Her hands shook as she opened the app. There it was, a picture taken on Fifth Avenue that afternoon. Harper frozen mid-step, groceries spilled, belly unmistakable, and Colton standing beside his glittering girlfriend, smirking like he'd won a prize. The caption, clearly written by someone eager for drama, read, "Ex-wife shows up pregnant just months after messy divorce. Who's the father?" Harper felt the room tilt again. Thousands of comments. Speculation. Cruel jokes. People dissecting her body, her worth, her child. And at the center of it all, Colton himself had commented under the post. "Not mine." 2 words. 2 words that detonated everything inside her. Before she could fully react, Mason re-entered the room, still on the phone, his expression darkening the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" She didn't answer. She simply turned the screen toward him. He went silent. Then something unmistakable shifted behind his eyes, a cold fury that didn't scare her but somehow steadied her. "He did this?" he asked quietly. "I don't know who posted it, but," he added to it. Her voice cracked. "I can't fight him, Mason. I don't have the money, the power." "You don't need power," he said, kneeling beside her again. "You just need people who won't let you face this alone." A tremble climbed her spine. She had spent months learning to stop expecting rescue, yet here was someone offering not to save her, but to stand with her. Before she could respond, another alert flashed across her phone. This one wasn't from social media. It was from an unknown number. "We need to talk about the pregnancy. Tonight. C. Arvre. Colton." Harper's pulse spiked. Mason's jaw tightened. Trouble wasn't coming anymore. It had just sent her a message. Harper stared at the message from Colton until the letters blurred. Her heartbeat thudded painfully in her ears. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear another accusation, another lie. But fear whispered that ignoring him might only escalate things. He had always been a man who punished silence. Mason noticed her breathing change. "Harper," he said softly, "you don't have to meet him alone." She shook her head. "I shouldn't involve you anymore. This is my mess." "That's not what I asked," he replied carefully. "I asked if you want to face him alone." No one had ever asked her that. Colton certainly never did. Before she could respond, another message popped up. "I know the baby isn't mine. Don't make this worse for yourself." C.R. A wave of heat flooded her body, anger, humiliation, disbelief. The baby was his, and he knew the timeline well enough to question everything. That was the cruelty of Colton. He preferred destroying her reputation over admitting he might be wrong. Harper swallowed hard. "I'll meet him. I have to clear this up." Mason nodded, but his jaw flexed with concern. "Then I'm coming with you, not to interfere, just to make sure you're safe." It shouldn't have comforted her as much as it did. But it did. They met Colton at a quiet corner near Central Park, where the street lamps cast long shadows and the city noise softened into a distant hum. Colton arrived late, of course. He always made his presence an entrance. His eyes darted immediately to Mason. "So this is the new guy? Figures. You always loved charity cases, Harper." Mason didn't rise to the bait. He simply stepped half a pace closer to her, not claiming, not aggressive, just quietly protective. Harper drew a slow breath. "What do you want, Colton?" "To make something clear," he said, voice dripping superiority. "This stunt of yours pretending that child is mine ends tonight." "It's not a stunt." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You're telling me that after years of infertility, suddenly magically you're 7 months pregnant with my baby? No, you're lying. And now that you're embarrassing me publicly, I'm giving you one chance to correct it." Mason's voice cut through the air, low and icy. "She doesn't owe you correction. She owes you nothing." Colton's expression twisted. "Stay out of this. She's my ex-wife." Harper's voice trembled, but didn't break. "I'm carrying the truth, Colton. Whether you accept it or not doesn't change reality." For the first time, something like panic flickered in his eyes. Then he leaned in, whispering sharp enough to cut. "If that baby is mine, you're in bigger trouble than you think." A chill raced down her spine, not from the threat, but from the certainty in his tone. Because suddenly, Harper realized Colton didn't just doubt the baby. He feared it. Harper barely slept that night. Colton's threat replayed in her head like a storm she couldn't outrun. She kept asking herself what he meant. Why would he fear the baby? What was he hiding? But no answer came. Only a knot tightening in her stomach until dawn painted the skyline gray. The next morning, a sharp knock rattled her apartment door. She opened it to find a man in a navy jacket holding a clipboard. "Harper Sullivan?" "Yes." He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served." Her world tilted. With trembling hands, she tore it open. Inside was a formal complaint. Colton was suing her for defamation, claiming she was publicly asserting the baby was his to damage his career and reputation. Her breath hitched. This can't be real. It was real. And worse, the lawsuit demanded immediate court appearance. Her vision blurred. She sat heavily on the couch, papers shaking in her hands. Colton wasn't just trying to deny the baby, he was trying to destroy her before the truth could surface. Her phone buzzed. "Mason," she answered, voice barely a whisper. "He served me." Mason was silent for a beat, then, "I'm on my way." Minutes later, he was at her door. No hesitation, no judgment, just presence. Harper tried to stand, but he knelt in front of her, gently taking the papers from her hands. His eyes darkened as he scanned the complaint. "This isn't just defamation. He's framing you as unstable. He's paving the way to take control." Her heart dropped. "Of the baby?" "Of everything," Mason said quietly. "Your reputation, your finances, your safety." A tear slipped down her cheek. She hated crying, hated feeling weak, but Mason's voice softened in a way that felt like a lifeline. "Harper, listen to me. You are not fighting this alone. I'll get a legal team, my legal team. Colton doesn't get to bully you anymore." "You've already done too much," she whispered. "I haven't done nearly enough," Mason replied. "And I won't let him corner you." Before she could respond, another knock sounded. Harper flinched, but this time it was her elderly landlord. He looked uneasy. "Harper, I received a notice. Someone reported you for violating housing terms. They're claiming unsafe conditions for a baby. If the investigation goes through, you could lose the apartment." Her blood ran cold. Colton. He wasn't waiting for the lawsuit to work. He was attacking her life from every direction. Mason stepped forward. "She's not losing anything." But Harper felt the walls closing in. For the first time, she wondered if Colton wasn't just trying to silence her, but erase her completely. Harper watched helplessly as her safe, fragile world continued, collapsing lawsuit, housing threat, public humiliation. It felt like drowning while the city above her carried on, indifferent. But Mason, standing in her small living room with sleeves rolled up and determination etched in his features, felt like the first real lifeline she'd had in months. He placed the legal documents on her coffee table. "Harper, listen, I've handled men like Colton before. He's loud, arrogant, and sloppy. That combination always leaves a trail." She swallowed hard. "A trail of what?" Mason hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "A trail of secrets." A chill ran through her. "You know something about him, don't you?" He exhaled slowly. "Let's just say, Colton's been on the radar of several corporate compliance teams. Nothing public yet, but enough to make him desperate to protect his image." His gaze sharpened. "A man that's scared always overplays his hand." Harper blinked. Her ex-husband? The same man who once obsessed over making their condo Pinterest perfect? The same man who micromanaged receipts? She couldn't reconcile that version with the one Mason described, a man possibly hiding far more than infidelity or cruelty. "Mason, why are you helping me like this?" His expression softened too much, too quickly before he straightened, as if catching himself. "Because I know what it looks like when a woman is being hunted by someone she once trusted." The room fell quiet. Harper's voice cracked. "Someone did this to you?" He nodded once. "My late wife. Before she passed, she went through something very similar with a business partner. I couldn't protect her then." His eyes met Harper's, steady and unflinching. "But I can protect you now." Emotion expanded painfully in her chest, gratitude mixed with a fear she hadn't felt in years, the fear of needing someone. Before she could respond, Mason's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression instantly sharpened. "It's my legal team," he said, stepping aside to answer. Harper listened to fragments of his low, controlled voice. "Yes, file for an emergency, stay on the housing investigation. Dig into Colton Reeves' financials, social media, associates. No, be discreet, he can't know yet." When he hung up, he returned to her with a calm, steady certainty. "Harper, we're building your defense from every angle. By the time Colton steps into a courtroom, he'll wish he never tried this." Her breath trembled. "You really think we can beat him?" Mason held her gaze. "I don't think, Harper. I know." For the first time in months, the crushing weight on her ribs eased. And she realized something dangerous. Colton wasn't the only one afraid of what the truth might reveal. 2 days passed in a blur of legal paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Harper tried to focus on anything except the lawsuit or Colton's threats. But even small tasks, washing baby clothes, sorting mail, felt heavy, like her hands were moving underwater. Mason checked on her constantly, sometimes stopping by after late meetings with takeout and a gentle reminder to eat. His presence steadied her, but even he couldn't soften what was coming next. On Wednesday morning, Harper sat on the paper-covered exam table in her OB/GYN's office, twisting a tissue between her fingers. "Routine checkup," she told herself. "Quick heartbeat check. Maybe even a reassuring ultrasound." But Dr. Patel walked in with a seriousness Harper had never seen on her face. "Harper," she began softly, "we need to talk about your latest test results." The tissue in Harper's hands tore. "You're showing signs of gestational hypertension. It's not uncommon, but in your case, the levels are rising faster than we want. Combined with your stress load, it puts you at risk of preterm labor." Harper's breath stuttered. "Is the baby okay?" "For now, yes, but we need to monitor you much more closely." Dr. Patel pulled a chair closer. "I strongly recommend reducing all stress, no heavy activity, no emotional strain. And Harper, avoid conflict whenever possible." Conflict. The lawsuit. Housing battle. Colton. Her entire life had turned into conflict. Tears blurred her vision. "I can't avoid it. Everything is happening at once." Dr. Patel gently squeezed her arm. "Then we need a support system to shield you from it." Support system. Harper had never needed one more. When she stepped into the clinic lobby, Mason was already there, leaning against a pillar with a coffee in hand. He straightened the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" She tried to speak, but the words tangled. Finally, she whispered, "They think I might go into labor early." A muscle in his jaw tightened. He didn't ask pointless questions or offer empty comfort. Instead, he guided her outside, one hand steady on her back, and said quietly, "Then everything in your life that causes stress, we cut it out, starting now." "I can't cut out a lawsuit," she said, voice cracking. "No," Mason agreed, determination sharpening his tone. "But you can step away from it. Let me handle the war while you focus on the baby. I don't want to rely on you too much." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You're not relying on me, Harper. You're letting someone stand beside you. There's a difference." His sincerity washed over her, warm and terrifying. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. Another message. From Colton. "If complications happen because of this pregnancy, that's on you." Harper's knees weakened, and she finally understood. Colton wasn't done hurting her, not even close. Harper spent the rest of the day trying to steady her breathing, but the doctor's warning repeated in her head like a metronome. Avoid stress. Avoid conflict. Protect the baby. Yet stress seemed to find her no matter how tightly she wrapped herself in quiet. By evening, Harper sat, curled on her couch, sipping chamomile tea Mason insisted on buying for her. The warm mug steadied her hands, but her thoughts churned like storm clouds. She kept rereading Colton's message, feeling the ugly familiarity of his manipulation pressing down on her chest. A sharp knock jolted her. Not gentle, not patient. A knock meant to intimidate. Her heart stumbled. Mason, who had been reviewing documents at her dining table, looked up immediately. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the door. When he opened it, Harper heard that voice, smooth, entitled, dripping superiority. Colton. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, eyes sweeping her apartment with a smirk. Cute place, Harper. Very humble. I suppose this is what happens when you don't have me to keep you afloat. Mason moved slightly, positioning himself between them. You weren't invited. I don't need an invitation, Colton said coldly. I'm here to protect my reputation. Something your friend clearly knows nothing about. Harper forced herself to stand, despite the dizziness tugging at her edges. What do you want, Colton? To make something clear. He held up a folder and shook it lightly. I've already filed additional claims. Emotional manipulation, attempted financial fraud, and if you keep spreading lies about this baby— It isn't a lie, she whispered. Colton ignored her. I'll make sure you lose everything you have left. Mason stepped forward, voice low and razor sharp. I'd choose your next words carefully, Reeves. Colton scoffed. Save the hero act. You think I don't know who you are? Mason Hart, the billionaire orphan, the medical tech golden boy. What's the angle here? You helping her out of pity? Or something else? Then he leaned in close to Harper, dropping his voice to a hiss she felt more than heard. You don't get it, do you? If it turns out the baby is mine, you've just handed me the perfect reason to take full custody. No judge will give a child to a woman drowning in debt, controversy, and dependency. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Custody. The words sliced through her like ice. Mason's expression darkened to something lethal. You're done here. Colton smirked. Not even close. He left with the same arrogance he arrived with, the door slamming behind him. Harper sank onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. Mason knelt beside her, voice steadier than she felt. I promise you, he said, he won't take your child. But Harper knew something with chilling certainty. Colton had finally revealed his true goal, and it was far more devastating than she imagined. The day after Colton's visit, Harper moved slowly, as if every breath required careful negotiation. Mason had insisted she stay at his corporate suite for a few nights, just until things calmed down, he said, but nothing in her life felt calm. The anxiety curled inside her like a second heartbeat. That afternoon, Mason walked in with a folder in his hand and a look on his face she couldn't decipher. We found something, he said. Harper straightened instinctively. About Colton? Yes, but not just him. Mason set the folder on the table, opening it carefully. This is related to his girlfriend, Talia Grant. Harper blinked. She barely knew the girl, only her surgically perfected smile and the expensive handbag she flaunted while clinging to Colton on Fifth Avenue. Talia is involved in something? Harper asked quietly. Mason hesitated. More than involved. She's a key part of a fraud ring being investigated by federal auditors. Luxury influencer sponsorships, brand partnerships, fake charitable campaigns, millions of dollars funneled through shell accounts. Harper stared, stunned. And Colton? He's tied to her? Mason nodded. And deeply. Enough that if this goes public, his career collapses overnight. Suddenly, Colton's panic made sense. His threats. His insistence that the baby wasn't his. His sudden obsession with silencing Harper. He wasn't protecting himself from a child. He was protecting himself from exposure. Harper pressed a hand to her belly, feeling a faint flutter beneath her palm. So he thinks, if he destroys my credibility, no one will believe anything connected to me. Exactly, Mason's voice darkened. He's preparing for the fallout. And he's trying to use you as his scapegoat. A familiar heaviness tightened her chest, but this time, something else rose with it. Anger, sharp and clean. How did you find all this? She asked. Mason closed the folder slowly. Because one of my subsidiaries once worked with Talia's management team. When I asked my investigators to dig, let's just say the trail didn't take long to uncover. Harper looked up at him. You're risking a lot helping me. I'm not risking anything, he said quietly. Colton made the mistake of thinking you're powerless. Men like him always forget what happens when the truth starts cracking their perfect facade. Before Harper could answer, Mason's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression sharpened instantly. It's one of my investigators. They said Talia just contacted Colton. She's panicking. Something's gone wrong. Harper's pulse spiked. What does that mean? Mason looked at her with a new, chilling certainty. It means whatever they've been hiding, It's unraveling faster than we thought. And for the first time, Harper realized Colton wasn't the only threat in her life. His entire world was collapsing, and she was standing too close to the blast radius. Mason hung up the phone slowly, the way someone does when they're choosing which truth to reveal first. Harper watched him closely, one hand braced on her belly as another kick fluttered beneath her ribs. Something in his expression shifted, less concern now, more calculation, as if the pieces of a much larger puzzle had just snapped into place. Talia isn't just panicking, Mason said. She's preparing to run. Harper's breath stilled. Run? From what? From the investigation, from the brands she defrauded, and from Colton. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. She knows the walls are closing in, and people like her, they don't go down quietly, they take others with them. A chill climbed Harper's spine. Talia, for all her designer handbags and glossy social media posts, had hidden something rotten beneath the glitter. And if she was cornered, she'd have no loyalty to Colton. None. As if on cue, Harper's phone buzzed. A news alert. She clicked it with shaking hands. Luxury influencer Talia Grant under federal review for financial misconduct. A second headline followed. Sources say corporate executive may also be implicated. They didn't name Colton. Yet. But the implication was a fuse waiting for a spark. Harper swallowed hard. He's going to blame me, isn't he? Say I leaked something. Say I did all this to get revenge. Mason nodded. It's his pattern. Control the narrative. Destroy anyone who threatens it. But I didn't do anything, she whispered. That doesn't matter to a man who's drowning, Mason replied. He will claw at anything to stay above water, even if it means pulling you under. Harper felt the old fear rise, tightening around her ribs. But beneath it, something else flickered. A strength she didn't recognize. A refusal to be swallowed again. Does this help us? She asked finally. Mason's eyes softened. It helps more than you realize. His credibility is crumbling. His lawsuit is weaker, and any attempt to take your child, he shook his head. A judge will see right through it. Before Harper could absorb the relief, Mason's phone buzzed again, this time with an unfamiliar number. He stepped aside to answer. Harper listened only to fragments. Yes, that confirms it. Reeves' signature on multiple documents. She flipped. Talia gave a statement. He's going to lose everything. When Mason returned, he looked at Harper with a mix of gravity and reassurance. Harper, he said softly, Talia just turned on him, completely. She's cooperating with investigators, and she named Colton as the one who orchestrated the money laundering scheme. Harper's breath caught. This was it. The beginning of the crack in his empire. But Mason wasn't finished. And Harper, she also mentioned something about you. Her heart stopped. What did she say? Mason hesitated. Enough, he said finally, that Colton's panic is about to get much, much worse. Harper had grown used to fear arriving in quiet moments, but she never expected it to come crashing into her life at 2 a.m. She woke with a sharp, twisting pain low in her abdomen, different from the usual discomfort of late pregnancy. This pain was deeper, urgent, wrong. She sat up, gripping the edge of the mattress as another wave hit. No, not now, she whispered, breath shaking. The suite was dark, except for the dim glow of a city that never slept. Mason, who had insisted on staying in the adjoining room, just in case, appeared instantly when he heard her cry out. Harper? His voice was low but sharp with concern. Talk to me. What's happening? The next contraction stole her breath. She doubled over, fingers clutching the sheets. It hurts. Something's wrong, the doctor said. Early labor was possible. Mason didn't hesitate. He knelt in front of her, steadying her shoulders. Look at me. We're going to the hospital. Now. She nodded, trying to breathe through the panic, but every movement felt like her body was splitting open. Mason grabbed her coat, shoes, and hospital bag with a speed that made her dizzy. He lifted her carefully, supporting her weight as another contraction tore through her. I'm scared, she admitted, voice breaking. I know, he said, tightening his hold. But you're not doing this alone. As they made their way to the elevator, Harper's phone buzzed from the nightstand. Mason reached for it instinctively, thinking it might be important. The screen lit up with a name that turned both their stomachs. Colton. The message preview glowed like poison. Stop trying to ruin me. I'll take what's mine, whether you want it or not. Mason's jaw tightened. He picked the wrong night to start a war. Harper barely had the strength to process the threat. Her body demanded all her attention. By the time they reached the lobby, she was drenched in cold sweat, her breaths shallow and desperate. The driver Mason had called rushed to open the car door. Mason held her steady, guiding her inside. "Harper, stay with me. You're going to be fine. The baby's going to be fine." But a terrifying thought seized her. What if the stress, what if everything he's done caused this? Mason cupped her face gently. "No, this is your body doing what it needs to do. Colton doesn't get to take credit for anything in your life. Not your pain, not your fear, and definitely not your child." The car sped into the night, sirens blaring in the distance, city lights blurring past the windows. Harper pressed a shaking hand to her belly as another contraction ripped through her. And in that moment, she realized this battle was no longer about survival. It was about protecting the only life that truly mattered. The ambulance lights painted streaks of red across the hospital entrance as Mason carried Harper inside. Nurses rushed toward them, guiding her onto a gurney, speaking in calm but urgent tones she could barely process. Everything felt too loud, too bright, too fast. Her body tightened again, a contraction ripping through her like fire. "Mason, don't leave," she gasped. "I'm right here," he said, gripping her hand as the gurney rolled down the hallway. "You're not doing this alone, remember?" They reached the labor and delivery wing. Doctors surrounded her, checking vitals, adjusting monitors, asking questions she struggled to answer. Then Dr. Patel appeared, her voice steadying the panic. "Harper, you're in preterm labor. We're going to do everything possible to slow it down, but we need to be prepared in case the baby comes tonight." Tonight? 7 months pregnant. Not ready. Her child wasn't ready. A sob escaped her. "She's too small. She can't." Dr. Patel squeezed her hand firmly. "Your daughter is strong, and so are you." They wheeled her into a delivery room, the fluorescent lights blurring as her vision swam. Mason stood just outside the door, not allowed to enter, but refusing to leave the window. Another contraction hit, harder than before. Harper cried out, clutching the rails beside her. "Please, not yet, not yet." Hours blurred together. Machines beeped steadily, nurses moved like practiced shadows, and Harper felt her body surrendering to something unstoppable. At 4:17 Dr. Patel looked up with careful seriousness. "Harper, it's time. You need to push." Terror crashed into her. "I can't," she whispered. "She's not ready." "You're not alone," Dr. Patel said. "We're ready for her." Through the window, Harper saw Mason's silhouette, hands pressed to the glass, forehead lowered. Even from afar, she felt his strength anchoring her. So she pushed. Once. Twice. A scream tore from her throat. Fear, pain, love, everything at once. And then, a cry. Small. Fragile, but unmistakably alive. Her baby. Her daughter. They placed the tiny bundle on Harper's chest for only a moment, just long enough for Harper to see a wrinkled face, a soft fist, a miracle she had fought for with every breath. Then the neonatal team whisked the baby into an incubator. "Is she okay?" Harper cried out, chest heaving. "She's fighting," Dr. Patel said gently. "She's in the best possible hands." The room quieted. Harper lay trembling, empty and full all at once. Outside the window, Mason wiped tears from his face, a man who never cried. And in that raw, aching moment, Harper understood something powerful. Her daughter hadn't just arrived early. She had arrived with purpose. Harper had barely held her daughter for 30 precious seconds before the neonatal team whisked the tiny infant into the NICU. Everything afterward, blurred paperwork, nurses' instructions, machines beeping in steady rhythms that felt like borrowed time. Harper lay in recovery, hollowed out yet fiercely alive, her heart now split between fear and a fragile hope only a mother could understand. Mason appeared in the doorway as soon as they allowed visitors. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes red, but his presence steadied the room. He pulled a chair beside her bed, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "She's strong," he said. "Stronger than any of us expected." Harper managed a trembling smile. "She's fighting. You both are." Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, confident, cold. Harper stiffened instantly. Colton. He stood in the doorway with the arrogance of a man entering a boardroom he believed he owned. His gaze flicked to Harper, then to Mason, narrowing with thinly veiled resentment. "So it's true," Colton said. "You went into labor early." Harper swallowed. "What are you doing here? What do you think?" He stepped farther inside, ignoring the stiffness in Mason's posture. "I'm the father. I have a right to know what's happening with my child." Mason rose slowly, a wall between them. "You don't get to barge in here after threatening her." Colton scoffed. "Threatening? I'm trying to take responsibility. Courts look favorably on involved fathers, especially when the mother is unstable." Harper felt the blood drain from her face. "Unstable? You faint in subways, collapse from stress, live in unsafe housing, surround yourself with strangers." His eyes slid to Mason. "And now you're relying on a billionaire to clean up your chaos. Doesn't exactly scream fit mother, does it?" Mason stepped forward before Harper could speak. "Say one more lie, and I'll personally make sure investigators see every shred of evidence tying you to Talia's crimes." For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed Colton's expression, but it vanished just as quickly. "We'll let the court decide," he said coolly. "And believe me, Harper, when they see how fragile you are, they'll give me full custody. I can provide stability. Money, a real future." Harper's breath trembled, but something inside her hardened. This man, this manipulative, hollow man, was not taking her child. Not now, not ever. "You won't win," she whispered, voice low but steady. Colton smirked. "You underestimate me." "No," she said. "I finally see you clearly." Before he could respond, a nurse appeared at the doorway. "Miss Sullivan, it's your daughter. She's responding well. You can see her now." Colton moved, but the nurse cut him off politely. Only the mother at this time. For the first time, Harper watched Colton be denied something he believed he was entitled to. And it was only the beginning of his unraveling. The NICU hummed with soft machinery, dim lights, and the steady beeping that felt almost like a substitute heartbeat for Harper. She stood beside the incubator, her hand resting against the clear plastic wall as her daughter, tiny, bundled, fighting, breathed with the help of a gentle ventilator. For a few minutes, the world outside didn't exist. Not the lawsuit, not the threats, not Colton. Then Mason entered quietly, his expression tight but controlled. "Harper, something happened." Her heart lurched. "Is it the baby?" "No," he said quickly. "She's stable. This is about the investigation." She exhaled in relief, but tension still coiled beneath her ribs. "What now?" Mason hesitated just long enough for fear to creep back in before he stepped closer. Talia made an official statement to federal agents. Harper blinked. "She already talked?" "She didn't just talk," Mason said. "She gave names, records, account transfers, all pointing to Colton as the mastermind behind the laundering scheme." Harper's breath caught. "He tried to use her as a cover," Mason continued, "but the money trail leads straight to him." A dizzying mix of emotions surged: vindication, shock, and something dangerously close to justice. But Mason wasn't finished. "She also told investigators something else," he said. "Something personal." Harper swallowed. "What?" Mason looked at her with gentle reluctance, as if choosing softness might soften the blow. "Talia," said Colton, "already knew the baby was his. He told her months ago he was worried the pregnancy would complicate things with the investors he was scamming." The world seemed to tilt. "He knew?" Mason nodded. "And that's why he panicked when you ran into him on Fifth Avenue. His empire was already cracking. You were the last thing he could control." Harper felt the floor of her emotions shift beneath her. All the doubt, all the self-blame, all the fear he had planted suddenly exposed as deliberate strategy. "He threatened custody," she whispered, knowing he was guilty. "He needed leverage," Mason said. "If you looked unstable, if he could paint you as dishonest, then everything you said would lose credibility, including anything tying him to the fraud." A cold shiver ran through her. "So he wasn't trying to protect his reputation," she murmured. "He was trying to bury me before I could bury him." Mason's voice hardened. And now, his entire strategy just collapsed. Before Harper could respond, another voice came from the doorway, firm, authoritative. "Miss Sullivan?" Two federal investigators stood there. "We need to speak with you. It concerns Mr. Reeves' involvement and your safety." Harper's pulse spiked. Colton wasn't just losing control. He was becoming dangerous. The two federal investigators led Harper and Mason into a private consultation room, quiet, windowless, humming with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Harper clutched the edges of her blanket, still wearing the hospital gown, her body aching from childbirth and fear. Mason stayed beside her, the anchor she hadn't known she needed until everything in her life had begun to crumble. One investigator, a woman with sharp eyes softened by empathy, spoke first. "Miss Sullivan, we need to inform you that Mr. Reeves attempted to contact our office this morning. He's trying to discredit the statement given by Miss Grant and any future statements that may come from you." Harper swallowed hard. "He's trying to bury the truth." "He's trying to bury you," the second agent clarified, "but he's losing control, fast." They slid a document across the table, evidence summaries, financial transfers, timestamps. Harper skimmed the lines, her breath tightening with every incriminating detail. Each sheet was another thread unraveling Colton's carefully constructed facade. "He will likely attempt to contact you again," the agent warned, "possibly aggressively. You must not respond." Harper nodded slowly, though dread pooled in her stomach. Once the agents left, Harper exhaled shakily. "Mason, this is becoming bigger than anything I imagined." He leaned forward, his voice steady but grave. "Harper, listen to me. You are not responsible for the choices he made. Your only job now is to heal and protect your daughter." She didn't realize she was crying until Mason reached across the table, brushing a tear from her cheek with a gentleness that unraveled her. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if he still tries to take her?" Mason's eyes darkened not with fear, but with a promise. "He won't, not while I'm here. Not while the truth is unraveling around him." He hesitated, then added softly, "And Harper, you don't have to face any of this alone anymore." Something warm pressed into her chest, unexpected, overwhelming. Gratitude, safety, maybe even something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the table. A text message from an unknown number. Her breath caught as she opened it. "You ruined everything. This isn't over." No name. But she didn't need one. "Colton." Mason saw the message, and a fierce protectiveness flickered across his expression. "Harper, give me the phone," he said gently. She handed it over without hesitation. Mason stood, his voice low and resolute. "It's time we end this. On our terms." For the first time since this nightmare began, Harper felt something shift. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was about to fight back. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished marble, cold, official, unforgiving. Harper sat beside Mason at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped in her lap, her daughter's hospital bracelet still wrapped around her wrist like a promise. The NICU team hadn't wanted her to leave, but this was the moment everything turned. Across the aisle, Colton entered wearing a suit too crisp, a smile too practiced. But beneath the veneer, Harper saw what she had never been allowed to see in their marriage. Fear. Real, suffocating fear. The judge reviewed the files, the fraudulent accounts, Talia's signed confession, the messages he'd sent Harper, the threats, the custody claim built on lies. Every page was a brick in the wall closing around him. Mason leaned closer, whispering, "Breathe, Harper. He's already lost." For the first time, she believed it. When Colton took the stand, his composure cracked almost instantly. He stammered, contradicted himself, blamed Harper, blamed Talia, blamed stress, blamed everyone but the man in the mirror. The courtroom murmured when the judge read the federal investigators' findings aloud. Mr. Reeves knowingly orchestrated fraudulent transfers totaling over $2 million. Additionally, evidence shows deliberate attempts to intimidate and coercively control Miss Sullivan during and after her pregnancy. Harper's chest tightened. Hearing the truth spoken aloud felt like exhaling after years underwater. Then the judge delivered the words Harper never dared hope for. Full custody of the minor child is awarded to Harper Sullivan. Mr. Reeves is to have no visitation until further review. A financial restitution of $300,000 is ordered for damages and emotional distress. Furthermore, the court recommends federal indictment proceedings continue. A gasp rippled through the room. Colton's face collapsed, shock, rage, disbelief folding into one expression of total defeat. He lunged up. "You can't do this. She ruined me, she." The bailiff held him firm. The judge's gavel struck like thunder. "Mr. Reeves, sit," Down. Harper didn't look away. Not this time. She met his eyes with a calm he could never touch. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and New York pulsed with its usual chaos. But Mason shielded her from the noise as she stepped into the sunlight, a mother, a survivor, a woman reborn. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "We did." Mason hesitated, then reached for her hand, not as a lifeline this time, but as an invitation. "Harper, I'd like to be part of whatever comes next, if you'll let me." Her heart warmed steady, certain. "For me and my daughter? For both of you," he said. And for the first time, Harper believed she could have a future made of choice, not survival. Because justice wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of the life she deserved. And just like that, the story has come to an end. My dear friends, if you are still here with me at this moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a quiet but meaningful way. Maybe it reminded you that pain does not define us, betrayal does not destroy us, and loss does not have the final word. What truly shapes our lives is how we respond. This story teaches us that dignity is stronger than revenge, patience is stronger than anger, and self-respect is the foundation of every new beginning. There is a gentle truth in the idea of altruism, the belief that even after being hurt, we can choose kindness over bitterness. As one wise saying reminds us, no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. When we act with integrity, even toward those who failed us, we free our own hearts. Healing begins when we stop asking why it happened and start asking what it is teaching us. If this story spoke to you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories continue, and more importantly, it keeps this space of reflection and hope alive.